Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Mark Haddad. He is an author, veteran, and he will learn from him about how to decode ambition, energy, identity through the fusion of science and soul. How we can get more clarity to lead, grow, and live with intention in today's complex world. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, AJ. Great to be here. Thanks.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Mark. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can, unlock purpose with soul and science. In this backdrop, we'll have a discussion. But before that, let's understand a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Yeah. So, I was a combat veteran in the Army for some time, getting into the Special Forces. I spent time in Colombia and much time across Africa, then going as a private contractor. So I worked for the State Department, again, doing more strategic advising across Africa and helping them with their missions and becoming more self-sustaining. And then I've always been in the technology space. Most recent in what I do, I work in artificial intelligence for one of the larger companies in the world. And I dabble in the Microsoft side and the IBM side. And I also work in the quantum computing world. So aside from the soul search internally and how I ended up where I am, there's a lot of science behind it. And so what I'm going to get into today hopefully makes sense for everyone.
Absolutely, Mark. That is bad. So I want to understand from a common person's perspective, what is it that that you are trying to achieve? Because you're coming from a different background. Now you are trying to talk about a different thing. So I want to understand through this, through you, what is it that you are trying to achieve through what you are doing?
So when we talk about our experiences and why the soul even wants to inhabit a life, a mortal being, we have, there's a philosophy that I step through in and how the soul, why would it want to come into a mortal being? What do we have on earth in this experience that a soul doesn't have on its own? I mean, the soul lives eternally, has all these capabilities, but all too often here on earth, we hear a lot of people trying to transcend and feel just at peace, and they're trying to be a soul. And one thing you have to take away from this is that the soul came into the body for a reason, to have a human mortal experience in any life form. So what do we have that a soul doesn't have? And that is, we have the ability to have experience. That experience as a human, in our case, gives us the ability to create biochemistry, which our mind converts and translates into emotion, and our soul feeds off of that. And so that's one thing that the soul has when it's in a body that it doesn't have when it's outside the body. It doesn't have emotion, the way we think of it. Now, there's other theories of dimensionality and what happens in that, but it kind of carries over to a lot of things. And when we start thinking about ambition and contentment, I get into categorizing what they are and how do you kind of step through an assessment of where you are, the machinery that you've been given. You've been given this BMS, body, mind, soul integration. And the level of efficiency of that integration is sort of the barometer in your life, in this particular life. And so when you think about ambition, what does it really mean? When you think about contentment, what does that mean? And judgment. So what I get to is that your human purpose is not the same as your soul's purpose. We have a duality. The soul wants something, but it's playing around in a body. Us as a human in this particular experience through life, through our nurture, through our nature, through the machinery that we've been given, we have different experiences. And that drives our human purpose, but our soul's purpose is different.
Absolutely, absolutely, Mark. So, what is it? What is soul's purpose? What is human's purpose? And why does it many a times, it goes in different direction when most of the time it has been done with a purpose in mind by whoever we want to believe, Lord Almighty, God Almighty, any particular thing that whatever whoever believes says so.
Yeah, well, if you put every religious leader in a room and you ask them who's right, they will all say, "Well, I'm right," because that's what they believe in, right? But if you put the top leaders of all the religions in a room and you ask them who's right, they will say, "We're all right." Depending on where you are in the hierarchy and your understanding, at the higher levels, we're all right. We're all looking within the same, imagine, the answer is in the middle of this cube, and we're all looking in the cube from different faces. And so we're all looking at the same thing. And when you think of spirituality, it's actually backed up by science. It's not an or. It's not spirituality or science. It's not that you're believing one or the other. Believe in both. The science actually proves spirituality exists. When you start getting into the quantum mechanics space, I'm pretty sure a lot of your listeners dabble in that to various degrees. But as you know, in any space that doesn't have matter in it, so if you go up into space, outer space, and you're looking at space itself, it is not empty. There are quantum particles coming in and out of existence all the time. We just can't observe them because of the bodies that we have. We have limitations, but that limitation is what makes us beautiful. It makes the experience beautiful. Imagine if you were able to see all the energy all the time in every single sense. It would be crazy. You'd go from gamma, theta, everything on the high end, ultra frequency, very high frequency, and then all the way down to our bands, right? Vision, you have scent. Scent is actually a frequency. We have hearing, sound, everything. And then you go into the microwaves, infrareds, and everything else. If you saw everything in all the bands of energy frequency, life would be nuts. We wouldn't even make sense of it all. So that limitation is what gives us the beauty. When we think about the purpose aspects of it, have you ever, you've played sports when you were younger?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So when we think about when we play sports, there are so many times where the coaches have broken down that spirituality and soul does exist. So typically in sports and even in the military, you are given your body and your mind. And we all say, look, this is a mental game. You have to be mentally sharp. Your mind controls your body. Your mind controls everything. When your body is failing, your mind is what drives you. But then what happens at halftime when you're losing your game? And you go in the back back at the room, the locker room, and your coach is sitting there. It's not a very good conversation. A lot of yelling going on, a lot of motivation is what we would call it. And what we find out is that the coaches say things, at least in the American sports, they'll say things like, you gotta leave it all out in the field. You gotta play with all heart. Leave everything on the field. Do not walk off thinking that you could have done anything differently. And then the people that won at the end, they're the ones that played with all heart. So we know, even as coaches, that it's not the body and it's not the mind and the body, but there's something beyond that pushes us way beyond what the mind and the body can actually do. And that's the soul. Now, when we say soul, spirituality, consciousness, I actually define them a little bit more detail when you think about it from across all the spirituality aspects of it and the science aspects of it. Consciousness is not, I don't believe it's a thing. I think it's a state of being. Consciousness is not like in a table. Consciousness is a state that we're in when we have a soul integrated with a mind and a body. So there is consciousness for us, right? We have the ability, we have ethos, we have morality. Those are the type of things that we have, right? So when we think about what purpose is, think of the soul as Julius Caesar. You remember back in the gladiator days, right? And at the
Yes.
end, when the gladiator had to make a decision, Julius Caesar would stand like this, and they would say, or down, right? And think of the soul is just feeding off of emotion. And when we do things as a human, like AJ, you could do something, the same exact thing. We could go skydiving. You could hate it and I could love it. It's the same exact thing. We're doing exactly the same thing, but for some reason, you hate it and I love it. That's our soul talking. So when we think about the biochemistry that's created from the stimuli, right? We're up in the plane, we're seeing everything, we're scared, we're nervous, excited. We're seeing all that. It's creating all this chemistry. That chemistry is going through our body. Our mind is decoding that, creating a frame of reference and experience for us. Our soul is saying, I like it or I don't. They absorb the emotion, and they don't. The soul doesn't care what emotion it gets. It wants to experience everything, because remember, the soul without the body doesn't have anything. So when I did research for people who've had near-death experiences, and you look across all the research, all the reports of what they've said, there's a lot of information in those, by the way. One thing that you can see, the thread that goes across all of them, is that they say that they were at peace. And the reason why they're at peace is that when you think you're at peace, when you meditate and you're trying to do a body scan, or you're thinking internally, or you're trying to hold a thought in your mind, which is very difficult to do for a long time, right? When we think of those things, we subside of all of our emotions. And that's why we feel peace, because we don't have emotion at that moment. That's the same thing as people feel when they're in a near-death experience. They're at peace. Why are they at peace? Because they're not attached to their body at the moment. They're not creating emotions, whether they're doing oxytocin, adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, serotonin, oxytocin, whatever those chemistry that they can create, they can't do it at the time. So they're at peace. And so the soul is looking for it.
Absolutely, Mark. So why do some people have regrets? In fact, a lot of people have regrets at the end of their life. You talked about, that coaches tell that everything is in the feet, and that you do whatever you can during that particular time. Beyond that, do not think that you could have done better. Nothing of the, it stays in the field. Then why do people still have regrets when they know about it, that it's just this life, nothing beyond that? How can they know that there should be no regrets? How can they understand? Or is it that they know it or don't want to understand it? Or is it just they don't know about it? What is your experience about it, Mark? Because you have a wide experience. You have seen the military life. You have seen people living in duality. You are trying to achieve your oneness in your life. Help us understand from the prism of all these experiences.
That's a very interesting question. When I was in one of the last missions I was in Burundi in Africa, there was some things that happened that were pretty horrible, and I realized when I left that I am never going to live my life in the I would have, I could have, or I should have mentality. I do where I feel that I should be, and I think that that's something that a lot of people, I think there's anxiety that holds people back from doing what they want to do. I feel the same way in a lot of cases. There's an analysis paralysis. There's a lot of different things. But I think regret comes from the notion that maybe they knew better. Maybe they knew better, but they didn't act. The part around the soul driving us to do the right thing, I think you always settle knowing that you don't have regret when you've done the things that you think that should have been done. And I think the soul drives us to do that. One thing that we talk about here is that there's a lot of people, say for instance, that have career changes that they want to do. They don't feel satisfied anymore in their careers, right? They spent 20 years in a career, and now all of a sudden they want to open up a flower shop because all of a sudden they think that this flower shop is going to get them satisfaction, or they're not happy in their relationship anymore. And when we think about this, I have something called the mind bar in my book that I describe how your mind manages the chemistry so that you can experience things without getting overwhelmed. And imagine the mind bar like a high jump in the Olympics. When you keeps going up and you have to jump over with the pole jump. So this high jump keeps going up every time you experience something. And what we have to realize is that at a certain point, this mind bar is at a level where your 20-year career or maybe your 20-year marriage is at a point where the chemistry in your body isn't hitting this bar. It's not adequate enough. And at one point we think, well, if we can't hit the bar and I don't feel adequate enough, I need to change. And people leave their relationships. People leave their careers to start something completely new. What they don't realize is that they may have been missing this mind bar by only a certain amount. It didn't have to be a very big amount. But if we realize this, we may not want to change everything for just a little bit of a requirement. And so when we think about the mind bar, we want to be able to understand, how do we get this excitement from doing what we want to do without having to change everything? And so I have examples in there around how people can adjust their biochemistry, adjust their mind bar to lower it so they could be more satisfied with things that they probably weren't as satisfied before. Remember when you graduated high school, we always, whether we believe it or not, or whether we want to admit it or not, we judged a lot of people. We always looked at the people like, oh, they're going to be doctors or lawyers. Oh, they're very ambitious. And then we went down the train and we looked at all of our friends and people we knew, and we judged their ambition or capability based on that. When in reality, the people who are trying so hard, advanced degrees, constant promotions, constant job struggle, they want the new car, they want the new house, they want more and more and more. They may be content at times, but they're certainly not complacent. Meanwhile, the people that didn't go do those things, who are ultimately happy, they seem like they're less ambitious, but that's not the case. Their machinery was better. That's what it was. Their mind, body, soul integration was more efficient than all of us other people that are just kicking our butts every day, trying to do more for that same amount of satisfaction. Our souls want the same thing, or our souls say, yes, I think this, but we're busting our butts. Meanwhile, the people that were just doing the things that we thought that weren't ambitious, but they were just the most efficient. They're doing the least amount of effort to get the most amount of contentment. That's what we found out. So ambition just happens to be not a measurement. Don't judge that as a measurement of their intellect or their measurement of their value. Think of ambition as just the measurement. It's almost like a coefficient on the integration efficiency. The more ambition they have to have, that means the least efficient their body and soul are to their mind. It's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to know before I come to your book, Mark, for the audience, I want to understand is that soul has a purpose. So do you think soul is selfish? Because it tells us all the time, and at the end, if it is happy, you live with peace. If it is not happy, you live with regrets, and the soul is not impacted, and it gets all the experience of through our body. That is why I ask, what is the soul's purpose? Do you think soul's actions are selfish here? How should we understand? Because body seems to be only a vehicle here. Means that's not good for the soul that ways. Good of the soul that ways.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting because what we're doing there is we're personifying a soul to have a personality outside the body. We don't
Yes,
know that. That's a belief. And depending on which religion you believe in, you can't say your religion's right because you know it unless you studied and picked it up. But most people get the religions from their family, from when they were born, where they were born. It's just how we were growing up, right? But to say the soul has that kind of what does it need, has the regret is interesting. One of the things that I came up with in the philosophy is, does the soul even care what we do on earth? Does it even care? Think about it. Outside of the space-time construct, right? Space-time is classical physics. It's space and the fourth dimension of time. But the thing that holds it up is the quantum physics programming. That's almost like the scaffolding of our reality, right? So that when the soul decides to come into the body, it comes in, and now it can operate and enjoy the lifetime in the space-time observable universe. But when it's done, does it even care? We don't know. Do we reincarnate? Depending on what you believe, we don't know. We could, very much so. But so there's, when we say reincarnation, then I'm gonna suggest this to you. It's kind of interesting because at the beginning of time, we had very few people. And then so the amount of souls that were present were very few. Let's say 2. Let's just go down to the number 2. Now we have almost 8 billion. How many souls that have been produced, died, whether recycled, split in half, or what? I don't know. But is there like a soul-making machine somewhere? Are there people like with this machine that's creating souls in the corner of the universe? And is there like a line for heaven and hell because all these other souls that have passed away, though they're in line, or is there another line for reincarnation if that's what you believed in? The thing is, when we think of reincarnation, there's an assumption that our souls are mutually exclusive. Because if you're going to retain your personality or your thought, there is no other soul that can have that one. So that's your individual life force that leaves and goes into another baby or whatever entity that it's going to go into. So that means it's mutually exclusive. So something is making all these new souls to get to 8 billion. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we have to sit there and say, well, what does the soul really want? I don't think it cares what we do on earth. I think our human form it drives us to do something that creates the chemistry and the energy within the ethos that the soul wants. That's what I think it is. Because I think when we pass, our goodness or badness is what sticks. I don't think whether, I'm in quantum computing or in your podcasting matters to the soul. I think it's, did we do good things that made us feel as part of our ethos, that we evolved in a human lesson? That's what I believe.
absolutely. And my thought, right now, what I was thinking about that you talked about the uniqueness of the soul, that every soul is unique and different. In the same way, if you see it from a science perspective, every human being is different. Our fingerprints are different. Our eyes, retina is different. And maybe, who knows, we come after, several centuries, we have a database of humans, and that will determine that, at different stages in our lifetimes, there were some human beings across different lifetimes, they had almost similarity between their retinas and their fingerprints, and maybe a few more things that science will discover. And then we can know, okay, this was one soul which visited
Yeah.
different bodies at different lifetimes. How does that sound to you, Mark?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I think that it is a better possibility. It's interesting if you think of, you have two. Imagine when the first two people were around. You have these two souls. There's a lot of soul in them, right? And now with 8 billion, maybe this is why we have such a degradation in humanity nowadays, because keep having to split people apart. So everyone now only has a little bit of goodness, or whatever we want to call it. Of course, I'm joking, but maybe that is true. But I do believe, like, there's something called non-locality in the quantum mechanics world. And non-locality talks about how that, not everything stays local, including memory, including learning and knowledge. One of the things that there's a neurologist, a neurosurgeon, his name is Dr. Hammeroff. And one of the things that he did in his research was he discovered that there are parts of our brain, specifically the microtubules, in the neurons, that are quantumly entangled with something else. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it's entangled with, but it's entangled with something at the neuron level. Not even just the neuron, it's a specific part of the neuron. And to me, that means that there's something outside of the body that's connected to our minds. Now, you said something interesting in terms of the database, because I do believe that, thought and memory and the information in our brains isn't necessarily stored in our brain like ones and zeros. I do think that they're connected to something else, perhaps outside of the brain and the other areas around us. The energy band that we are observing in our universe is not everything. Even the band, like outside of the energy wave frequencies that we can measure, right? We've created a lot of tools to measure all different frequencies. But just like how there's dark matter and dark energy, there is material and frequency beyond what we can observe. That's mind-boggling, because what that means is that even in our own space, say the Earth in the universe, there could be an entire other set of beings operating in the same exact space that we're in, but at different frequency. Like I'm not talking about the hippie, everything's energy frequency thing. I'm talking legitimate, scientific frequency, because material science is based on that. And I say, if our band of energy is right here, well, what if there was another band of energy here that happens to be where dark energy and dark matter exist, and this band of energy can operate in the same space that we're in? We just never know it, because the machinery that we have, the bodies that we have, the eyes, the nose, ears, everything, we're only adept to interact with material in our own frequency range. That is the answer to dimensions. There are, other frequency ranges overlapping in our own same space. So, there is a very good possibility that there's other material in our same space. Perhaps that's where the souls are when they leave the body, right? And staying in the same space, just not interacting with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just think of you are being a military person. You know about it during during wartime or peacetime. Every military communicates in their own band, and the civilians coordinate in their own cell phones. And you just don't know. We as humans only know about certain frequencies. We don't. God knows how many frequencies are there in the same space and time that we are in. We just don't know. It's like, human eyes can see something else. The web, Hubble used to see something else, and the web is looking at things much more differently. 100 years down the line, we just don't know what different things can help us see at different things existing in the same realm at the same time. But those are interesting things. We put both science and spirituality together. But let's come down to your book, Mark. Tell us a bit about your book. Why, who is this book for? If I understand, this is the name of the of your book. Soul spoke to you, to me. Soul's Guide to Navigate Purpose.
Yeah. So when I was in the story of where, how it came out was that back in 2011 was the last uh, mission I had in the military world. And I realized that every person that we would try to save, every person, every child that we were saving, every village that we were in, getting rid of bad guys trying to hurt them and take the children. I realized that every time you take a bad guy out, two bad guys come in, and that the world is consistently changing. And, unfortunately, when we leave that evening to go back to our area, anything can happen to those kids. And I was asking, what am I doing? Yes, this is work that is helping people, but I realized that my two children back home, they don't know where their dad is. They didn't care. They were too young. All they know is that their dad's not home. And then I realized that the only thing that I'm responsible for on this earth is managing their experience, is ensuring they have a good experience in life. Because no matter what frame of reference I'm in, they're not there with me. They're in their own. And I started, this is where the philosophy started really taking foot around what is our purpose here? Why are we in a body? And I kind of go through all those things. We look at this, and this applies to a number of things. Like, for instance, people who have PTSD, people in the military community. I use this book to help them from a self-assessment perspective, and really helping them bring down their mind bar so they can enjoy normal life and really acclimate and come back to where things are, to a level that helps them be able to manage their biochemistry. People who are going through a lot of change in life, especially, relationship issues, career issues, the feeling of, last thing I heard, I was talking to someone and they said that their friend was just sad and uninterested in anything anymore. And so we started dissecting that and kind of helping them out there. But also younger folks, one of the things that we realize today, at least in the culture in the United States, is that there's a huge value gap that's grown over the years. And a lot of the younger generation needs a little bit of guidance around, what is their purpose? And it's not what's your purpose. Are you supposed to be a sports star or an engineer or, a salesperson? Not that kind of a purpose, but how do they align their soul's satisfaction, complacency with what they do? Because in that case, they'll never get tired. They'll never get exhausted in what they do. And ultimately, they'll be successful. So there's a short answer to, that's a long answer to your question. There's a lot of different applications to this. I'll be launching workshops and assessments, self-assessments on the internet here shortly. So it should be pretty interesting to see what people say.
Absolutely. There's much to learn from you about all these things, Mark, and I'm sure a lot of people who want to connect with you, learn more about you, about your book. What's the best way for them to do so?
I have my website, markhaddadauthor.com. I also have my Instagram, Mark Haddad Author 1. I'm rolling out different snippets of the meaning behind a lot of the things that said in the book. So I have a very good friend of mine who's a pastor who's read this 3 times, and he said it's a very difficult read for him because he had to go and reflect on every section deeply. And he said, this is a very reflective book. It's only, the book is only 90 pages long. I wanted to keep this in a very short format where I state the truth of the philosophy, and then I give the background and the examples that we do every single day in normal life. That proves the point. And so there's a lot of reflection. And so it's interesting. So go to either the website or my Instagram and interact with me. I'm happy to chat with everyone and get your thoughts.
Absolutely. With this, it's set up on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.